as far as my childhood goes, cold duck at Thanksgiving was the extent of wine. And then when I got to college, I really graduated to better things, and that was either a red bottle of Mateus or a green bottle of Mateus, if I really wanted to impress someone. Food, wine, music, art all kind of coalesced at one time when I was in my late 20s. I was a art history undergrad, and then I got an MA in English, writing poetry, and decided maybe eating would be a good addition to that, and got an MBA. So I started, ended up I was in the steel industry, worked in nuclear power for a while, and I worked in the department store business. And about 11, 12 years, what all of those things had in common was that I didn't like working for $10 billion corporations, and they weren't particularly crazy about me working for them either. So it was time to go out and do something, not necessarily on my own, but to do something that was not within a corporate structure. I'd left corporate life and I was going to go to work with a former friend, I haven't seen him many years now, to turn around a business in South Carolina, and it just didn't materialize. We came out west for a wedding in Seattle. I hadn't been back in 20 years, and my wife at the time, she had never been here. And after that, we were flying home from San Francisco. We decided to take a tour and show her what my childhood home had been like. And we were driving down the coast and came inland and ended up at a small winery that, in fact, is across the street from where we are right now. And a fellow there, it was early September of '85, said, "If you're so interested in this, why don't you come work a harvest?" Go back, sold the house, sold the cars, threw the dog in the station wagon, came out and worked harvest in 1985. Did that for just that year. I thought, I'll never be in the wine business because I don't know how to make wine and I don't have nearly the capital to do it. And spent years marveling at the people who had never figured out either of those things and were in the wine business. Then when the Druin family came in 1987, they were looking for someone to do development studies. And David Lett and David Adelsheim pointed to me and said, he might be able to help you. And I did the original study to put Domaine Drouhin here. When I left Drouhin in '01, and it was just time to go do something on our own, and I was actually going out to make William Hatcher on the high end, and Deb pointed out sagely that it's a couple of years till we're going to have any cash flow, and feeding the kids might be a good idea. So in 2002, summer of 2002, there was a lot of wine from the 2001 vintage on the market, bulk wine, good bulk wine, because the vintage had been so large and the industry just didn't have the capacity to market it. She said, let's go buy some, blend it, make a stopgap wine that gets us to where we want to be. So in the process of doing that, we ran into Sam and Cheryl and they had the same idea. We knew Sam and Cheryl, and Sam was the winemaker at Archery Summit and Cheryl was the winemaker across the street at Chehalem. Industry was a lot smaller then, you knew everybody. And Deb said, there's enough for everyone, let's go in this together. So we made 2,576 cases of 2001 Oregon Pinot, and we had to have a name for it. Well, it was bulk wine, we didn't know where it was going to come from, and Deb said, how about A to Z? It could come anywhere from A to Z. That was the start, because we'd solved the problem of Oregon makes great wine, but it's so expensive. And we were making wine that was under 20 bucks. We kept evolving. That's been a real key to the business. So we've always been able to avail of opportunities as they've come up, reinvent ourselves as we've needed to. It's getting harder now because we've gone from being a very big, small winery to a very small, big winery. And now we're competing with giants. Well, we thought we could make A to Z work because we had the ingredients of 4 people who could do all of the things that needed to be done. I had the business experience to run things and to organize things, and Deb had the marketing knowledge and talent to do it. She is the brand today, still. And Sam and Cheryl had the winemaking and viticultural experience, so we really didn't even overlap that much. We just kind of fit together in a neat whole. And we had, through our prior relationships. We knew people around the country to establish the sales portion of the distribution. So it was, yeah, we never doubted that part. We just admittedly were surprised at how fast it grew. We thought we were going to make 2,500 cases of wine, split the proceeds, and go do our own high-end projects. I mean, that's as far as it went at that point. With our production model, it also, I suppose, in the beginning limited our thinking as to how big we could become. And then we got out to the 2011 vintage, and we had made 136,000 cases of Pinot Noir, and we were in the Wine Spectator Top 100. And what we had learned by then was that as we got bigger, it didn't necessarily mean that the quality would fall off. As long as we continued investing in equipment, knowledge, and good vineyards, we got smarter and we learned how to make better wines. You know, our 15 Pinot Noir, we made something like 200,000 cases of it. It's the best Pinot Noir we've made. We are now making the best wines we've ever made because we've just tapped into the collective experience that we have. Aristocratic wines at democratic prices was Deb's creation, as all of our marketing slogans have been. And the idea was that we were going to deliver more value to the customer for the price than they expected. So it's an aristocratic wine, but it's going to be a democratic price. It was a great tagline until we got to the 2008 presidential election, and I started getting outraged emails that said they'd never buy our wine again because it was democratic. And I was foolish enough to answer these and explain, well, no, that's not what that means any more than Republican means this, and that only further incensed people. And finally, my handler said, stop answering email. So, yeah, the lesson in that is that you can take something that you think is innocuous as a marketing idea, and it can be a flashpoint for people's interpretations. You have to think about every marketing tagline. I didn't have any passion about Pinot Noir. The passion I've had, and I still have, is about creating a great business. I probably was fired 4 times in my career. And every company I worked for, I looked at and I said, this isn't the way I would do things. This isn't how I would treat people. This isn't how I would make products. There's a better way to do this. And I said, yeah, whenever I have that opportunity, I'm going to remember these lessons and I'm going to create a great company. And if you create that culture, yeah, the business becomes so easy to run. People here get up in the morning and you know they like to come to work. A to Z became a B Corp in 2014. B Corps are rated or scored on 4 characteristics. 1, environmental practices, 2, employment practices, 3, governance practices, and 4, social practices. It was important to us to be a B Corp because it was the most salient way to reflect our values. When we first made it, and we scored somewhere in the 80th percentile of companies that made it, I think we were like 104 out of 200. The average company would score about 50. You have to score 80 to make it, and we were like 104 or so, and most recently in the recent audit that they did of us for 16, we were somewhere over 130. And we've actually been named as a B Corp leader among the top 10% of B Corps in the last 2 years as well. You have to make a big investment to be a B Corp. You have to change a corporate charter. You have to say that it is not simply shareholder value, but it's social values that you're going to, and we had to convince our shareholders of this. Peter Drucker described the difference between leadership and management. Management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right thing. The toughest thing for us in the change in the industry is our progression through the looking glass to becoming that small, big winery. We now compete directly with Gallo, Constellation, Jackson Family, we're in those same channels, big channels. And so how do we take limited marketing dollars and target the customers we need to grow? And now one of the things we've learned that's been fascinating is that the average A to Z customer, the average wine customer, buys 2 bottles a year of a brand, which was so heartening to us because it means that we have ways, we're able to compete that way to get someone else to buy 2 and someone else to buy 2. The initial money for A to Z was a $60,000 loan against the house. From there, Sam and Cheryl put in an equal amount, and we started this with about $100,000. And I have to admit, making wine's fun, selling wine's hard. With no money, we had to set out on a strategy of outsourcing everything. So at one point, we were making wine in 9 different wineries. And it wasn't until we got to a critical mass of about 50, 60,000 cases that we knew we had to bring in investment. By this time, I had enough banking relationships that we started to bring in bank funds. And we had gotten to something like $2 million in debt in 2 years. And we need to go to 3.5 if we're going to make this thing work. And the expression on their face is one I'll never forget. But at that time, we also, to support that debt, we finally needed to have an investor. And I'd had a friend who had wanted to invest since the beginning, but I wasn't willing to let my friends invest until I knew that their money was going to be secure. And that friend was Greg Popovich, who's the coach of the San Antonio Spurs. And if I thought, okay, I'm not going to lose Greg's money if it comes in now. So one night, driving to dinner in San Antonio, he goes, "Oh, here, I got something for you." And he handed me a very big check as we went to dinner, and it was pretty much a handshake that sealed the beginning of my business relationship. A to Z kept growing, and finally it became necessary that we had to have a place of our own to make wine. And it wasn't so much that Rex Hill was an opportunity at the time, it was our only choice. It was the only winery that was for sale in 2006. When we bought Rex Hill, it was a 35,000 case winery, and we almost immediately reduced it to 9,000 cases. And we did that because we knew A to Z was going to be the critical mass of the business. And from a winemaking standpoint, we wanted Rex Hill wines to be the very best wines they could be with no need to compromise on a blend. And when I said earlier about I wanted a great company makes great products. We could make this wine cheaper, to be sure. We could buy cheaper grapes, but we're not going to do that. That has been critical to our success. Rex Hill was, I wouldn't say it was opportunistic. I mean, it certainly was a turnaround. But we found over the years that we were spending more time, the challenge of turning it around was a little bit like turning the battleship. Fixing a brand is a very difficult proposition. And that is why we have been so focused from the beginning on marketing with A to Z, but real marketing, not fluff around a poor product. We have a good product and we communicate the value proposition of that product, and we do so in a consistent way, knowing, I mean, we knew this before, but we had firsthand what happened when the quality of wine slipped, the sales of the wine were discounted deeply, and fixing something like that was took much more time than we could afford, given the challenges of A to Z's growth. If you walk out there now and you look at the buildings that we've added something like 85,000 square feet. Economically, it didn't turn out to be the ideal thing to do. I mean, it's worked out just fine for us, but there have been a lot of construction challenges over the last 10 years. After we bought Rex Hill, the growth continued. Actually, as we went into the recession, we probably had our largest growth year with A to Z. things were humming along just fine. And then we hit a wall in 2008. We had a combination of factors that was a perfect storm. We were selling about 100,000 cases, and our brokered sales force had hit their limits on ability to sell wine. We needed our own sales force. There was a worldwide wine glut. I could walk into Whole Foods and see our wine that was always stacked at $17.99, and next to it was a California Cabernet that said was $43.99, now $21.99. And I could just visualize people taking their 2 bottles of A to Z they'd buy, putting them back, and reaching over and taking 2 of the Cabernet. At the same time, we had artificially high grape prices in Oregon, and to fund the growth, we had to keep buying fruit at inflated prices, but we did keep a little tally of who was overcharging us for fruit because we knew one day that was going to turn around. And so all of that came together to put us in 2009, 2010 in a really tough spot. I had a board of directors at the time that was pressing me to cut people, cut salaries, cut this, cut that. You can't hire a new sales force, your own sales force, that's a fixed cost. And I realized that if I listened to them and I did these things, we were only going to keep ourselves going another couple of months, and we were out of business. So in the fall of 2010, I had World War VII with my board, and it came down to, it's either you or me, but we're hiring this sales force. I went through 3 really tough years there, sticking by my guns. We hired that sales force, and we did something Oregon had never done. And that was, we hired people from Gallo, from Santa Margarita, from Rosemont. Everybody we hired had run or sold a 1 million case brand. There was a head of sales and 4 vice presidents who came in early 2011. And when we interviewed, they all asked the same question: can you make enough wine for us to sell? And we took a big gulp and said, yeah, we can do that. And we have. We turned the company around in a year, and that's really where Bank of the West was more than a partner. When we were going through these difficulties, they recognized all of the challenges, and they said, everything you are doing is right. You've got a good product, you've got good management, you've got good marketing. 2 years from now, you'll be just fine, and we're going to back you. Even though we had defaulted on a covenant, we are going to back you. And we turned it around in 1 year. Building an on-premise presence is always valuable because people go into a restaurant, they have a glass of your wine, particularly when it's by the glass. They have a glass of your wine. They see the wine on the wine list. They go, this must be good. And so from a marketing standpoint, that echoes outward. It's easier said than done, particularly when you're making a value wine like A to Z and you want to be on a 4-star restaurant list. We did well with it, but one of the things we did perhaps even better was to build relationships with the airlines. So we were in first class on Delta, British Airways, American, Continental at the time. We were on NetJets. And so there, if you sell 2,500 cases of wine to an airline, and there are 5 glasses per bottle, well, you've got 150,000 glasses of wine that have been passed out to people. Now, some have more than one and quite a few, but you're getting so many impressions, as they say in the ad business, by doing that. And that was something for a long time was very valuable for us. DTC is a very small part of our business. Our percentage of Rex Hill sales that are DTC would be 15%. I mean, it's not anything to scoff at, but when you look at the size of Rex Hill, in the whole, if we grow that to 20% and spend that energy, or we grow A to Z by 10%, it's a nonlinear relationship. You don't even sell A to Z out of Rex Hill. And for Rexhill itself, we hold our own. And we have a marvelously talented staff, more than DTC. I mean, we've had, I don't know how many groups have come through here today, but there was a group of Danish sommeliers were here, and and our educational component spent time with them. And that's going to build a market, a foreign market for us. But we try to do more of that than the onesie twosie to the counter. We grow that, but you can't grow it dramatically because of the proliferation of wineries. The end of 2004, there were 200 wineries in Oregon, and now that we're pushing 800. 10 wineries account for half the sales in Oregon. And so the other 800 are fighting over 1.6 million cases of sales. And so the little wineries are cannibalizing one another. And it's really too bad because we're getting a lot of money coming in here from people who didn't have quite enough money for a baseball team. So they build a $30 million winery with no profit motive. It doesn't affect us because we're on a scale and we sell into channels that are different. From a DTC standpoint, the small family wineries here are people who are talented at what they're doing, and this is their livelihood. This is how they put shoes on their kids' feet. Essence of Oregon was a foray for us in seeing what would happen if we took A to Z a little bit higher on the price point scale, without, compromising the essential A to Z label, the base A to Z label, and without getting too close to Rexhill. We made about 10,000 cases of it, and it's kind of tiptoeing into that. We do not want people to look at, oh, that's the good A to Z, and oh, that's the regular A to Z. So we tried to make it distinctive enough that it stood on its own, but it is still under the A to Z moniker. One of the things I do as CEO here, when you ask, is it scary to do things like that? I'm always on people to take a risk, make a mistake, screw something up, see what happens. That if we're going to do things, the way we did them yesterday and today and tomorrow, not only will we get stale, but competitively, we're not going to be as viable as they were, and people aren't going to learn from it. I want people to feel empowered, that they own their job here. And if you make a mistake, okay, what'd you learn from it? And let's move on from there. People do say Washington and Oregon in the same breath. California is the winery region, and then there's this little marginal area that's collectively called Washington and Oregon, but they couldn't be more distinctive. First of all, Oregon grapes are grown on the west side of the mountain in a cool marine climate, and it's Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris, and Chardonnay. And Washington grapes are grown in a high desert climate, and it's Cabernet, Merlot, Syrah. Completely different varietals, completely different climate, and we always find that amusing that those two are lumped together. But beyond that, it also suggests how poor a job we've done as an industry in marketing our distinction and making Oregon known for what Oregon is. We are very committed to Chardonnay. With A to Z, we're producing about 30% of Oregon Chardonnay. And my partner Sam, since the very beginning of this, has always felt that there was equal potential for Chardonnay in Oregon as there was Pinot Noir. He's never wavered in that. He said it's just a matter of finding the right clones, the right sites, and making the wine in the right way. But we backed Sam all the way on making Chardonnay, and we've expanded A to Z now, which is all unoaked, to about 40,000 cases, but we're also making we're making 2 right now, but we've made 3 or 4 different Rexhill Chardonnays, just more as experiment to see what can we take here that we can pull over to A to Z, and what is going to work that we can maybe grow with Rexhill. But it's been the Chardonnays that we're making here have gotten better and better and better. I've not been much of a Chardonnay drinker, and Sam's making me one. certainly think there's room in Oregon for young people to do things entrepreneurially. There aren't any industry. I mean, every industry has someone who comes in and disrupts it and changes the pathway. As I said earlier, I think it's becoming difficult for small producers to gain a foothold, gain identity, because there are so many of them, and establishing a market identity of brand. Who are you, and what makes you different from this winery down the street? That's tougher and tougher to do. But I think what's really needed in the industry, and Sonoma is hopefully going to provide that, is to get people who bring some business acumen and some business discipline to the industry. The tough thing about transition for us, and maybe this is what keeps me up at night, is the eventuality of how do you maintain this culture for the people who are here? And anything to do with transition, I won't say anything to do, what I would desire to do with transition, in 10 years they get up and come to work, it's the same company, or it's essentially the same company. If my goal was to build a great company, it sure shouldn't be to walk away from a great company and leave that company to whatever fortune it may find.